Hello and welcome to our second episode of the Illinois Catfishing Podcast. I'm your co-host, Danny Castle, joined by my other co-host, Jim Castle. And our destination of the month this month is Lake Springfield in Springfield, Illinois.
So Springfield, Illinois for us is about a 3 to 4 hour drive. So it's about 200 miles south of where we live. But it was actually a very easy drive and quite a lot of fun to go down there. It was a wonderful setting. And on our way, the first thing we did was we picked up some of our cooked shrimp from our local supermarket, mostly because I sort of have a superstition about that being the best shrimp, but that's probably not accurate. Anyway, then about an hour into the drive, we stopped in at the Bass Pro Shop down in Bolingbrook, which was a new Bass Pro Shop for us because we normally go to the one in Gurnee, Illinois. So Danny will tell you about what we bought there in preparation.
So when we got there, we bought one size 1 Gamakatsu circle hooks, which is kind of our go-to for hooks. And we also got 8-inch wires, a couple packs of those. I like them better than the 2-foot wires because you don't really need a 2-foot wire. We also got half-ounce weights and some rod holders, some sturdier rod holders, because we knew that down at Lake Springfield there's blue and flathead catfish, which are much bigger than the channel catfish that are traditionally up here. We also got a couple of Zebco reels that we talked about last week. They worked pretty well. One of them got tangled. It was kind of a disappointing tangle. It's usually we buy the Zebco lure reels to avoid tangles like what we got. But yeah. Okay.
We were able to eventually work the tangle out, though. And also, I guess this brings up a good point about Danny and I developed somewhat of a different system for rod holding. Danny prefers to go now with 2 rods, it looks like, over the course of the weekend. He sort of changed that up because we were in a new spot and he wanted to maximize the number of rods he had out there. So he had 2 lines, and for that, obviously, you need rod holders. I still prefer to have 1 rod in my hand. To me, there's just no substitute for sort of feeling that bite. And because a lot of times these bites are very subtle, and if you've got it in a rod holder, at least in my mind, you really can't tell that there was a bite because not every time does the fish take it and run in the opposite direction where the line gets taut. Sometimes it takes it and then comes towards you or goes to the side, and I find that I can see that and feel that if I'm holding the rod, whereas if I've got too many rods, I can't see what's going on, and I kind of rely until the fish makes a run with it eventually away from my position to notice that there is a fish on. So that was sort of one difference between the two of us. I don't know if you want to add to that, Danny.
Well, there is something to be said about the fact that the fish in Lake Springfield bit a lot more subtly than here. For the most part, they were smaller. We caught a lot of half-pound to pound size channel catfish. We caught 1 6-pound blue and 1 8-pound channel, which those were the two biggest catfish we caught the entire weekend. So they were very subtle bites. They did not bite the way that they do in the northeastern lakes that we fish in. They kind of nibbled it. It was like we were fishing for bullhead. A lot of them bit like bullhead. They were very subtle, and if you didn't get to the rod in time, then they'd be off.
Yeah, I noticed on the 6-pound, we caught a 6-pound blue catfish, which for us is kind of a big deal because in northeastern Illinois, it's extremely difficult to even get to a lake that has a blue catfish in it. And I noticed on that particular bite that there really was no tug. The line simply moved about 2 feet to the left with no tension on it at all. And it was only because I saw the line move 2 feet that I recognized that there clearly must have been a fish on. So I was able to then pull the line tight and get a good hook set with the circle hook. So I still prefer the holding my own rod. It's just a slight difference of opinion between Danny and I. Danny prefers having 2 rods out there to maximize things. So anyway, so we finished our ride down to Lake Springfield, and we had a little bit of daylight left on that first evening. So we actually went to a place called Beach Park, which is on the east side of the lake, maybe about a half mile down from the north end of the lake where the dam is. Kind of a nice place, actually. You know, all of Lake Springfield was surrounded by really nice public parks that you could fish from, which is a little more difficult in our area. There's typically not seating there for people who are fishing. So this was a really nice park. There was a boat ramp there, and we sort of went to the south side of the boat ramp and cast out and we had about an hour's worth of fishing before it went dark. And frankly, we don't fish after dark because we can't see what we're doing. And I just think it adds a level of difficulty that we haven't gotten into. But Danny can tell you how the fishing went there at Forest Park.
Well, as you said, we were not going to fish through the dark. The method that we have is keep the bait on the bottom. We don't really mess around with using bobbers and bluegill. That's more of something that we use for bass. But I think at night it's better to use the bluegill with the bobbers. So it's just harder to do. The catfish are more active at night. But while there was still daylight, we caught one channel catfish. It was pretty small. It was like normal bullhead size. It was probably about a half pound. And then we caught a yellow bullhead.
Yeah, just to add to that, I actually think the channel catfish was a little bit bigger than half pound, but
It was half pound.
I felt like it was a full pound. I tried to over exaggerate perhaps the size here, but maybe a little bit more like a pound and a half.
3/4. We'll give it a 3/4 pound. It was not that big.
And then we also had a discussion, since we just started this podcast, whether to add on, any bullhead that we catch to our report. And Danny and I sort of felt like, well, we wouldn't celebrate all the bullhead we caught, but we would mention them because, in our mind, they are part of the catfish family of fish. And if they're big enough to swallow a whole shrimp, to me, they're big enough to report. So these things were about, all of them about 10 inches to about 14 inches. When we talk about bullheads, we're talking about fairly big size bullheads in sort of the 10 to 14 inch range. Anyway, Dan, sorry to interrupt, Danny. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, as my dad said, they were a pretty big bullhead that we caught. They were about the size of the smaller catfish we caught. So they were about half to 1 pound bullhead. And the other thing is that yellow bullhead are not very common around here, at least in our vicinity, because we just have a lot of brown bullhead that we have around here. So yellow bullhead's pretty cool for us to catch. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, part of what I love about fishing is just the colors on some of these fish, and those yellow bullhead had a really nice olive look to them. They kind of blend right in with the grass. I mean, it was a kind of a nice looking bullhead. So we thought we'd mention that. So basically, the tally from that first night was we got in 1 hour of fishing, we caught a channel catfish, and we caught one fairly big size yellow bullhead.
I should also add that I did try live bait, but I did not have a bobber on it. I just let it sit on the bottom. We caught, it was probably about, like a 4-inch, would you say 4-inch, like sunfish. I don't know if it was a long ear reddy or sunfish, but it really had a nice color to it. But, I didn't really know what to do because I wanted to catch a flathead catfish, and I know that you have to use live bait for that. So I put this 4-inch sunfish on there, and after that, I didn't try that again. For the rest of the trip, we just used shrimp on the bottom.
And Danny, why don't you just remind the listeners what kind of rigging we use and how far we cast out from shore?
Okay, so we had. Again, we put the half-ounce weight on first, and then we put a bead on there. And the beads you can find really in any section of Bass Pro Shop. They're pretty much everywhere. I think I found the ones that we buy. It was either in the catfishing section or it was in the trap section, I think. And then we tie. You can really use any wire you want. This time we used 8-inch wires. And then we put the size 1 Gamakatsu circle hook.
Or 1/0. I think we use some 1/0 hooks as well, if I'm not mistaken. Either one of those, I think, is good size for a good size catfish.
You also don't. I mean, it really depends on what size catfish you buy. So if you have really small catfish, you want to use a smaller hook. If you have obviously bigger catfish, you want to use a bigger hook because otherwise, the smaller catfish. I mean, what we had a problem with was we had a lot of smaller catfish and bullhead nibbling at our bait, and the hook was just not. It was just too big for the smaller catfish. We thought we were going to have bigger bites because there were blue and flathead and bigger channel catfish down there. So, yeah.
But again, one of the reasons I really like using shrimp is that there's not much to nibble on. So when these panfish come, they're not going to steal your bait the way they would if you were using a night crawler or some soft bait that can just come apart in pieces. So I do feel though, like if you use big bait with big hooks, generally that's better for catching big fish. Whereas little bait with little hooks, if you're targeting small fish, and obviously that's probably common sense to some of the listeners, but I thought it was just worth mentioning here that if you're looking for a big catfish in sort of the 5 to 15 pound range, I would rather have a 1/0 hook in there than a size 1 hook. But it's everybody's preference is a little bit different. I'm sure a size 1 hook would do the job. It just would make me feel a little bit better about the fish not torquing the hook and getting loose from.
Just to add to my dad's point, catfish will usually eat anything that'll fit in their mouth. So if you have a small bait, really anything that can fit it in its mouth will eat it. So and we'll get to this as we're going along, but towards the end we started using bigger shrimp and it started working a lot better. But
yeah, and so so our daylight ran out on day 1, and so we spent the night, and then in the morning we went to a spot a little bit south of Beach Park, and I may have misspoken earlier and used Beach Park and Forest Park interchangeably, but the first night we actually fished at Beach Park. We had some success in that first hour. The next morning, we went to Forest Park, which is actually a beautiful park, taking nothing away from the fishing that we had there.
It looked really promising.
Right. It looked absolutely promising. There was a nice, the shoreline was such that there were some coves that we sort of felt like, this is going to be great. There were some deep coves, and there were some bridges and some piers where you could go out and do some fishing, and so we parked on the south side of a cove that had a bridge called Michael's Bridge, and if you look on Google Maps, it's sort of unmistakable, particularly on the satellite image. There's this bridge, this footbridge that goes across a cove. We spent a really good amount of time working the south side of that cove and off of the bridge, but probably we should have heeded the word of this little kid who was fishing there, who was probably about 10 to 12 years old. We said, have you ever caught any catfish here? And the kid said, my whole life I've never even seen a catfish in this cove. So probably should have listened to him, but needless to say, we spent several hours there, and Danny can tell you what kind of things we found.
So we kind of cast it out. At the beginning, we cast it out into the very end of the cove. I thought there was some brush there. There was a fallen tree. So I was like, let's try and get a flathead. So I put the bait right around there. Nothing for about 45 minutes. So we're like, all right, we'll move a little out of the cove, or a little bit farther into the mouth of the cove by where the bridge was. And we had some bites, but these were like really, really small bites. They were probably bullhead. And then we moved on to the left side of the bridge, and we finally caught a bullhead. It was really small, though. It was probably the smallest fish we had the entire day. It probably was barely
10 inches, maybe.
Yeah, it was a small bullhead, though.
But if ever two people had earned a catch of a bullhead, it was us. We were really grinding out there, trying to work every last little pocket and deep hole to see if we could, there was a kayaker out who had a fish finder with a depth finder and everything like that on it, and he actually sort of instructed us to cast it out to this one hole where he thought he was seeing fish, and we tried working that for a while, and I think we were out there for probably 3 hours and caught nothing other than that one yellow bullhead.
We worked the whole thing. I mean, we went out there was a small little boat dock, and it was outside of the cove, and I tried casting it out there. We had one good, nice bite out there, but we finally just decided, all right, let's try the bridge, see if we can find a deep channel by the bridge. and it just, it didn't work at all. We were having a hard time finding any bites towards the end, so we decided to move to our technically our third location.
So our third location is we drove north up to near the dam, and near the dam on Lake Springfield, there is a structure there that almost looks like a series of elongated steps, probably about a quarter-mile wide each step, and there were some families fishing out there. We thought we'd give it a try because it was fairly close to the dam, although I think both of our instincts was to tell us that this was probably not going to yield a lot of fish. Just didn't look like there was much structure there other than that the concrete building that was there for people to sit and fish from. And so we spent about an hour there, and Danny can kind of tell you about how that went.
So when we were at our previous location, there's a website called Fishity, and I checked that website just to kind of find a spot that people have had luck at, and it has spots that people have pointed out on the location on the website. It's got like a satellite image of the lake, and so it said that the dam had a little bit of success. There were small catfish that were apparently caught there, and so we tried it out. We were kind of in the middle of the dam. We were not near near where the water was coming out, and we were also not near the end of the steps by the very end of the rocky, what do you call that? Like the rocky banks, I guess. There was like a long stretch of rocky
Yeah,
banks.
it was sort of like a semi-bridge. It was like these long concrete steps width-wise, not height-wise, long concrete steps width-wise that led up to a highway on a bridge. And I think it sort of begs the question that we probably should talk about, which is how long do you sit in a spot until you decide, look, this is not worth our time, we need to move on. And I think both Danny and I kind of agreed that 45 minutes is a good amount of time. If there's going to be a bite and you've got 3-4 lines out, 45 minutes is probably good enough time to decide, look, there's nothing going on here. I mean, we had not a single bite, if I'm not mistaken.
Especially if there are no bites in that area at all. If you have some pretty decent bites, or if you actually catch fish there, then you can decide to stay. Last month when we went to Independence Grove, we had some success in one spot, and we decided to stay there for about 2 hours, and we caught 2 fish in those 2 hours. So it really all depends on how the success is, what the vibes you're getting there. But yeah, we decided after that spot, we waited there about 45 minutes and not a single bite, not even a touch. So we decided just to go get lunch and then come back to a different spot.
Right, and I would add there was no shade at that spot either, which is sort of troublesome to me because this is down south. We're talking Labor Day weekend here in Springfield, Illinois. We're sort of more of we live about 30 miles north of Chicago, so we're not maybe used to that heat. And it was
just a tiny bit warmer, but
but I could use a shade tree if they're available. So that spot was totally exposed, full sun. So after lunch, then we drove to the south side of the lake, and actually that's when the day started really heating up. That's when the fishing really got good. The first spot that we went to was a place called Cotton Hill Park. Beautiful spot. There's an old railroad track that goes through there, and it probably is still a working track, and it runs right across the lake, and there's a beautiful park that juts out into the lake, and we fished a cove there that was sort of between the park and the railroad tracks. It looked like a really nice spot, and it had a nice shade tree, and there was just a little bit of boat traffic, just pleasant enough, not overly noisy. And then Danny, why don't you tell them what we got there?
So when we were there, we caught 1 yellow bullhead and 1 channel catfish. And actually, wait, did you catch a bullhead?
Yeah.
Okay, so
we
actually
I think we
two
caught
bullhead.
3 yellow bullheads.
We did?
To be honest with you. Yeah, I think we actually we got a lot of bites at that location, but it seemed to be
Small
populated
bites.
by a lot of small catfish.
Or bullhead.
Right. So I think we ended up catching 3 yellow bullhead and then that 1 channel catfish.
It was, again, another small channel catfish. It was probably bigger than the one we caught Saturday night. I mean, would you agree? It was probably a little bit bigger.
I mean, to me, everything's at least 1.5 pounds. Okay, so when you walk into a Bass Pro Shop, they say all fishermen and liars welcome here. So in my mind's eye, that thing was at least 1.5 pounds, maybe a good 2 pounds, but probably Danny's estimate is more accurate.
1 pound, I would say. I'd say 1 pound to 1.25 pounds, and it just, it was decent. When it comes to eating catfish, that was a good size eating catfish.
And I guess I should mention, we did get one piece of feedback from our last show, which came from my father, who grew up in Iowa, and told me that he thought it was an insult that we said that catfish don't taste good. Apparently, when he was growing up, he used to eat catfish quite a bit, and he said it actually was delicious. So, and this was wild-caught catfish, and he said it didn't matter the size, it always tasted really good. So I thought maybe in the winter time we could do some kind of, when we have to go dark, if there's no open water in the winter, we could do maybe something about how to properly cook a catfish. Danny looks like he's got something to say.
Well, there is something to be said about the fact that the catfish that we caught before was in a location that it was in a highly polluted location. It had a lot of
boat traffic for one.
Boat traffic. It was on the Fox chain of lakes, and
it was also a large catfish.
Yeah, it was a 10-pound catfish. It's a pretty big catfish.
If what's true of other fish is true of catfish, my hunch is that you really, in order for it to taste good, it really should not weigh anything more than 3 pounds. So anyway, we had a fairly decent haul. We stayed at that location for about an hour to 2 hours, and we got 4 fish, even though 3 of them were yellow bullheads. And then we stopped at a local grocery store and picked up some extra jumbo shrimp. This time we got frozen jumbo shrimp, but that worked out really well actually because it was in the juices thawed out as it unthawed and made for a really good flavor. It felt like it had marinated for a while then in its own juices. And so we drove to what then turned out to be absolutely the best fishing, no question, of the whole trip, which was at this place called Glasser Bridge. It's called the Glasser Bridge Park and Fishing Area. And so we drove out to the end of the park there where the boat ramp was. And Danny can tell you all about how that went.
So the place that we were at, it had a lot of it had running water. It was kind of like a river. It was from the dam. I think it was over for like the dam. That was like the dam's current, right?
Yeah, it was. It actually was a nice setup where there was water running down the channel, but then it would sort of eddy back into this pocket that we were fishing from, and I think that made for really good catfish habitat. Was the sense I got.
Yeah, I think there was. I didn't have the depth chart in front of me, but it seemed like there was a really deep channel in the middle of the what do you call it? The river, I guess.
The lake, yeah. The lake. I mean, it is a dammed river, so when they open the dam, that river starts flowing again. It behaves more like a river, but
it's also on the south side of the lake, which is technically the river part.
Right, the far south side. So go ahead and tell them about the fishing.
So when we got there, we kind of thought it was going to be a full spot. At least my dad did. He thought it was going to be kind of a no good spot. We almost passed it up, but then I said, actually it looks pretty good. I thought it looked nice in the fact that there was running water. So I thought, maybe it'll work out. A lot of good catfishing stuff. Catfishing is on rivers. So we casted out our shrimp and we started having the small bites that we were having before, and then finally my dad was able to catch a catfish, and it was a pretty normal sized catfish. Like I think it was probably about 2 pounds. Would you say?
Yeah.
Channel catfish, and then we started to kind of spread out along the bank. We were originally in one spot, but then we started to spread out by the kind of like the landing. Landing zone for the kayaks and
the boat ramp.
Yeah, the boat ramp. It was not really like a traditional concrete boat ramp. It was like there was a lot of gravel there, so it was not like a dugout area. It was just it looked natural.
And not a lot of boat traffic coming in and out of there too, which was nice.
There may have been 2 or 3 kayakers coming in and out, but that was it. So we So my dad decided to go over there with one rod, and that's where he had the blue catfish bite. So for us, as we said earlier in the show, it's a big deal to catch a blue catfish. For us, blue catfish are kind of rare up here. I don't even know if there's any lakes that really have blue catfish. I mean, there are some there's like the Fox River and Fox Channel Lakes has flathead, but blue catfish is kind of a treat for us.
Yeah, I don't think it's native to our part. It's possible some of the lakes around here stock it, but to my knowledge, Lake Springfield specifically stocks them.
Well, when you look at the iFish Illinois, it says that the population is improving, so they're probably native there, but they do stock it. They're trying to get the blue catfish population up.
But that was a great catfish. And again, it was one of those things where this is why I really believe in holding on to my rod rather than having it in a rod holder. I don't think I would have recognized that catfish was on, and I'm not sure that he had really swallowed the bait. I mean, it was probably just sitting in its mouth, and it moved a few feet, and I suddenly realized, hey, that line moved 2-3 feet to the side. It was sort of subtle. And so I, sort of just securely set the hook. Obviously, we're using circle hooks, so you don't jerk it home. I just kind of slowly applied tension, and sure enough, then the fight was on, and that was a blast catching that one.
Yeah.
And again, we don't have any native blue catfish up here, so it was a real treat to catch one of those.
I thought it was pretty cool how how first of all to catch the blue catfish, but second of all how that spot, just seemed to be the spot, because then I decided, I'll move over here, I want to catch a blue catfish. So I moved over there, and then it seemed like it just was a better spot, only like, what would you say, like, 30 yards from the spot we were originally, and, the fish just, the fishing just picked up almost immediately. There must have been something there, some drop off or something that was right there, but it was a great spot. But then, as I said, the fishing picked up, so we caught a lot of other channel catfish. I think the biggest catfish we caught of the day was like an 8-pound channel catfish, was it? And it was like, I think it was 8 pounds, right?
Yeah, you reeled in a big bull of a channel catfish.
It had, it had a huge head. That's all I remember of it.
It did have an unusually large head.
I mean, proportionate to the body size. When I saw it come out of the water, it kind of surfaced a couple times, and I was like, whoa, this is gonna be like a 15-pound catfish. And I brought it in. It just it almost looked like a big bass, where it had a massive head, and then it just kind of thinned out. Then we caught a lot of other smaller catfish. I think we caught one bullhead, one yellow bullhead. Actually, I think it was a brown bullhead, to tell you the truth. It had a brown top, it looked more like a brown bullhead.
Well, I think it was all yellow bullheads, but I don't feel that strongly that I would disagree. But why don't you tell, what was our total catfish haul from that spot?
So we caught 5 channel catfish from that spot, 2 blue catfish from that spot. We caught, besides the 6-pound blue, we caught a 2-pound. I think it was like 2 or 3-pound blue. It was probably closer to 3 pounds.
Yeah.
And then 1 yellow bullhead. And then that spot really heated up at about 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock exactly, I think we had like a triple header, like almost immediately as the clock struck 5, we had a triple header. And that was where we caught the 8-pound catfish, and I think that was the second blue catfish.
Right.
So, we had it was pretty cool to have a triple header. I didn't really know what to do because one of my lines was going, and I couldn't tell if there was a fish on it or not, and I was reeling in the other, and then he was trying to unhook the blue catfish. But, and then it really stopped at about 6 o'clock, would you say?
Yeah, it just shut down as quickly as it started. It just shut down at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it's one of those crazy things in fishing where for some reason, just at some magic moment, the fish decide that they're not going to be hungry, or they move on to a different spot. But I do think we caught a nice little sweet spot down there by that boat ramp. And I think it probably had something to do with that eddy current. I always got the sense that catfish like to sit in places where sediment will come out of the water, so that if there's debris or fish that are dying, that they get sort of pushed off into these little eddies where it's easy for the catfish to get them. And so they like to hang out in some of those deep holes and come up and grab those things that have washed out of the current. So I think that's why that one little area was successful. But of course, with everything in fishing, it's almost always a mystery as to why this location versus that location worked better. I mean, there were other spots that day that just seemed like they should have worked, and yet they
Yeah.
didn't. So
The first spot, I thought we were going to hit the honey hole. I was like ready to set up for the day right there at that spot, and then we just didn't get anything. I mean, it was crazy how slow it was. I thought we'd at least get something, at least like just a small channel catfish, but we were somehow able to get in the yellow bullhead, which I actually, I didn't even know was on the end of my line. Like, I saw a little bite, and then I kind of let it sit there for about 15 minutes, and I was like, I'm just going to reel this in. The line is slack. The bait's probably gone, so I reeled it in, and there was the yellow bullhead. But another thing I want to add about that last spot is we ran out of shrimp from Heinen's, and my dad went to get shrimp. Where'd you go to get shrimp?
I think it was called the County Market in Chatham, Illinois, which was really convenient because it was only about a 5-minute drive from where we were.
And so he got frozen shrimp, which is kind of against our MO, but he got them, and we still had a couple more shrimp left. So what we did was we decided to pull out the new shrimp, let them dry in the sun, or let them not dry, heat up in the sun. But what was kind of interesting was they were much juicier than the shrimp that we got at Heinen's. The ones that we got at Heinen's were really dry.
Sort of drained even.
Yeah.
It makes you think they
did look
drain them after they cook them, and there was
Yeah.
something to that juiciness of the frozen ones.
I mean, it triggered almost an immediate reaction. It was really, really good. However, I would say that they were big. They were like jumbo shrimp, so we had to cut them in half. And if you cut them in half, you should probably use the top part first, because that worked a lot better than the bottom part.
I had some success with the bottom. I kind of thought the bottom part worked really well too. But
I thought the top part worked better. I tried the bottom part and it turned them off in my mind. It stopped, and then I put another top piece on, and it worked a lot better.
Well, I think either way is good. Either side of it, provided you don't take all the meat off of the top part and you leave some meat on the tail. I think that the fish don't mind that hard tail. We didn't take the tails off; we just left them on. But I think to a catfish, it all tastes natural anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's especially important that, as we said last episode, to keep the shrimp at like water temperature.
Right.
Because I think it is true that the catfish will spit them out if there's something off about it. If it's too cold, they'll spit them out. And same goes with if they're just too warm. I think it's better to have them too warm because they can, it's a lot less unusual to the catfish if it's too warm.
Yeah.
But it's very important that you don't cast out a fully frozen shrimp. You want to make sure that, what I do is I pinch the shrimp, and if I can feel that it's thawed out all the way, then that it's probably the right temperature.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just to reiterate what we talked about last time, I cast out about 20 to 30 yards from shore. Danny's a little bit farther than that. I tend to use a directly over my head cast. I find that doesn't add a lot of whiplash to the cast so that the shrimp doesn't fly off, whereas I think Danny goes more of a 45-degree angle, from his body with the rod, and gets a little bit more action on that.
If I want to get it farther out, I don't know why, I just have like that, just that feeling that they're probably a little bit farther out. I don't know if it's that they're deeper or whatever. I just have some sort of feeling that they're farther out than my dad does. But I use leverage to my advantage and just try and get it out as far as I possibly can. And if I find it's too far, then you don't want to reel it in and then leave it there, because your bait could be covered in seaweed. Your bait could be gone. I mean, a lot of times when I'm reeling in, my bait gets caught on seaweed and then it comes off completely. So you want to make sure that if you're recasting, you reel all the way in. You don't want to just leave it there after having reeled it in.
Yeah, and I prefer just to go directly over my head, literally straight over my head and forward, because I think it gives me a little bit better direction, and it tends to not be enough whiplash to cause a the bait to fly off.
I do it looks kind of like a fly fishing cast, where I take kind of a step back. It's not fully fly fishing, I don't want to say that I'm doing a fly fishing cast, but I bring my my shoulder and my arms back, and then I just fling it out there. So it's kind of like a mixture between a football throw and a fly fishing cast. So I just try to get it out as far as I can.
Yeah, and I find when I do that things go haywire, and typically what ends up happening is that my shrimp is then seen flying about 50 yards and clearly having flown right off the hook. But
yeah, my dad's getting older.
So I think that about wraps it up for this episode. It was a ton of fun going down there. I would say anyone who gets a chance to go down and fish at Lake Springfield, that was an absolute blast. I can't say enough about that.
Especially if you live down there.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and you can get to it quickly. I mean, it was just a lovely scene. There was, like a little store you could buy whatever you needed right down the road for most of these places, and just a wonderful time. But I guess if we were to choose one spot, if you go down there to go fishing, it would be at that Glasser Bridge Park and fishing area. That's the name of the park there, and that seemed to be where we'd had far and away the most success.
Yeah.
So we will see you next month. We're not exactly sure the location. We're going to check the map, and then obviously as the winter comes on, we're probably going to have to be much more selective about what places have open water that are accessible.
Rivers. We might go
Rivers and
Fox River
south.
if it's still open.
Fox River and things like that, or head down south where the water has not frozen.
Maybe the Illinois River. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to email us at illinoiscatfishingpodcast@gmail.com. Please send us your thoughts and any tips or locations that you got that any of you listeners want to share with us. We can do an episode there.
Yeah, we would love to get some advice on places to fish, locations to hit, and what time of day and things like that would be very much appreciated.
Or if you have a special bait that you want us to try out and get our opinion on it, then you can send in your thoughts through email there too. And we also have a website. It's illinoiscatfishingpodcast.com.
That's right. There's nothing really on the website, but we're hoping to maybe add some photos and things like that at a future date.
Contact page there too. So that's really all we have. But
thanks very much for tuning into this, and we hope to see you next month.